WWE Developmental Territory Florida Championship Wrestling officially became known as NXT in August of 2012. The company was seeking to revamp their farm system in a bid to create the Stars of Tomorrow ahead of opening the state-of-the-art Performance Center. Positioned as a third brand moving forward, NXT, which had previously been the name of the game show that replaced ECW in 2010, featured many holdovers from FCW, as well as a few new additions to the ranks. Having recently stumbled across the original roster page for NXT, I was struck by how many of them really did go on to become major names in the business. I was also struck by how many of these future prospects I'd never even bloody heard of or had otherwise completely disappeared from the industry. 10 years is an age in wrestling, or so it would seem. The transition from FCW to NXT must have been an exciting time for the hopefuls busting their backsides down in Florida, but just what became of them all? Mason Ryan, Stevie Ray, Earthquake, Alundra Blaze, Norman Smiley, Zach Gowen, Bam Bam Bigelow, Ahmed Johnson, Torrey Wilson, Buff, Bagwell, Robert Gibson, Dave Taylor, Terry Taylor, and Godfather's Holmes. Dwayne Gill, Adam Bomb, Michael Hayes, Cor Von, S.A. Rios, Jim Manai, the manager from Kai and Tai, Jim Powers, Francine, Jack Swagger, Mean Gene, Fat Chick Thriller, Duke the Dumpster, Oklahoma Manta. What happened to that wrestler? Some were main eventing, which leaves me lamenting. What happened to that wrestler? Some since long forgotten, but their memories live on. Adam Mercer. An amateur wrestling standout who sought a career in the pro game after high school, the 6'5" Evan Singleton originally trained with indie outfit Combat Zone Wrestling before catching the eye of WWE and getting signed to a developmental deal at the tender age of 19. Named Adam Mercer, he would go on to have 11 matches across FCW and NXT in 2012, wrestling the likes of Big E, Luke Harper, and Eric Rowan. Regrettably, in his last outing, he suffered what was described as a serious head injury and was released before ultimately retiring from the business. He later unsuccessfully attempted to sue WWE over their concussion protocols. These days, he competes as a strongman in competitions across the United States. Aiden English. Signed in early 2012 after only working a handful of matches on the indies, Aiden English first found third brand success in the quirky Vaudevillains team with Simon Gotch. They won the NXT Tag Team titles and were certainly over with the Full Sail audience, but like many unconventional acts that get brought up to the main roster, it didn't quite shake out as well on SmackDown. Aiden floundered at times, but struck up a winning partnership with RUSEV, which sadly also didn't quite live up to its full potential. Cut by WWE in April 2020, English, as Matthew Raywalt, has since wrestled on the indies and for Impact and New Japan Strong, two promotions he also provides commentary for. He's married to Shaul Guerrero, daughter of Vicky and Eddie. Alexander Rusev. File this one under how the hell did WWE manage to mess up this guy? Seriously, Alexander Rusev had so much going for him and was a performer who clearly worked hard to better every aspect of his game over the years. The Bulgarian Brute, just prior to his April 2020 release, barely resembled the barefoot wonder who first signed with WWE a decade beforehand. He was leaner, meaner, and far more accomplished, having impressed in feuds and matches with the likes of John Cena, Roman Reigns, and AJ Styles. Despite possessing the size, talent, and look that WWE craves, they strangely never pulled the trigger and actively cucked him into oblivion prior to wishing him well in his future endeavors. Their loss is certainly AEW's gain, where, as Miro, he looks like a surefire future world champ. Outside of wrestling, the Redeemer is married to CJ Lana Perry and also does some acting work. Baron Corbin. When you think about it, Baron Corbin is really one of the WWE developmental success stories, especially as far as NXT is concerned. Coming from the world of pro football, the big, tall and athletic lone wolf first made an impression as an imposing hoss on the black and gold brand. Since graduating to the main roster, Corbin has taken everything he's been given and done his darndest to make it work, establishing himself as one of the best pure heels in the company in the process. He's been Baron Corbin, King Corbin, Sad Corbin, Happy Corbin, he's been pushed as a headliner and presented as a joke, but he's always given maximum effort and will probably be a WWE guy for as long as he desires. Big E Langston. Just looking at Big E Langston for more than half a second, it becomes readily apparent that this man is truly something special. He impressed down in Florida with his raw power and physicality, but struggled to really stand out as his own man during his early main roster days. The former NXT champion was floundering before hooking up with Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods, with the New Day group giving the careers of all three performers a new lease on life. Since their formation, they have been one of WWE's most reliable acts, and E in particular has emerged as a major star. The ex-WWE champion is currently nursing a broken neck, but fingers crossed he will be back, and fingers crossed he will be better than ever. Bo Dallas. Taylor Rotunda signed with WWE in 2008 and wrestled under his real name for several years before switching to Bo Dallas when Developmental was rebranded NXT. Dallas was a big fish in a small pond at Full Sail, but you better believe he got lost in the shuffle after graduating to the main roster. A perennial hanger-on, the former NXT champion did at least manage to snag the Raw Tag Team titles with the similarly underappreciated Curtis Axel. His WWE run pretty much just petered out as it was evident that creative had nothing for him. Since his April 2021 release, he has started his own cooking show on YouTube and vowed to return to the ring before long. He and girlfriend Liv Morgan currently live on a farm and are starting a real estate business in order to prepare for their life after wrestling. Brad MADDOX. You know, where are they now is a very good question when it comes to Brad MADDOX. I can assure you now, it's not trapped in a cave. Controversial inside the ring and out, MADDOX's WWE career was overshadowed due to various scandals. The one-time Raw general manager was fired by WWE in 2015 for referring to the crowd as cocky pricks during a promo ahead of a dark match. Having left the business, these days he is married with children. He and his wife run a business called Married and Manifesting. Brandon TRAVEN. A trainee of the late great Harley Race, Ryan Collins had been on WWE's radar for a while before he officially signed his developmental deal in 2012. As Brandon TRAVEN, he didn't fare too well in the farm system, wrestling a handful of matches where he was mainly used to put others, such as Damian Sandow and Brodus Clay, over. TRAVEN was released in May of 2013. He then went back to the Indies and then Japan, first with Noah and then New Japan, but hasn't wrestled since 2017. Nowadays, he is a podcaster and seems to be really into action figures and t-shirts. Bray Wyatt. Wyndham Rotunda signed with WWE a year after younger brother Taylor, the siblings already having an advantage since they were the sons of former WWE star Mike IRS Rotunda, who had also worked as a road agent for the company. Wyndham had the same teething problems many do, trying to find an identity and having to persevere through Husky Harris en route to striking gold with Bray Wyatt. The leader of the unsettling Wyatt family, Bray was a great character and was pushed strongly from the off. You could write a thesis exploring the Eater of Worlds trials and tribulations on the main roster, but overall, Bray should be very happy with his work as both the Backwoods Dweller and as the Fiend. Despite being a popular main event level star, Bray was shockingly released on July 31st, 2021, and has not been seen in a wrestling ring since, focusing his energies on the upcoming horror film he's set to star in. A father of four, Bray has 2 kids with his current wife, the former WWE ring announcer JoJo Offerman. Briley Pierce. Briley Pierce is better known as Ryan Nemeth, aka the little brother of WWE superstar Dolph Ziggler. Ryan didn't quite reach the same heights as the show-off, having been in various phases of the developmental system from OVW to FCW to NXT. His stay on the third brand yielded few, if any, highlights before he was released in mid-2013. He did the indie thing for a while after and has now found his home in AEW, where he's a member of the weirdly fun stable, the Wingmen. Byron Saxton. Big buff Byron Saxton was NXT before NXT was NXT, appearing as a rookie contestant on the 4th season of the game show, as well as the 5th Redemption season. Saxton switched from bending bones to calling the action following his elimination, becoming the third brand's play-by-play man. He's since donned the headset for just about every WWE show going, from Raw and SmackDown to Main Event and 205 Live, and has also worked as a ring announcer. Chad Baxter. Chad Baxter, WWE developmental prospect or jock in an 80s teen film who flushes your nerdy little face down the toilet. Derek Ford's professional wrestling career was brief, consisting of 10 whole matches matches spread across a few months in 2012. A college wrestling standout at Notre Dame, Ford didn't continue in the pro game after WWE released him, but he did lend his voice to those taking aim at head coach Bill DeMott. Today, the family man works in financial services. Chase Donovan. Before signing his developmental contract, Chase Donovan worked 2 dark matches for WWE, both against Crime Time, 2 years apart from each other in 2007 and 2009. He also made 2 appearances on NXT television in 2012, doing the favors for Big E and Roman Reigns. Donovan was one of several developmental prospects who never graduated to the main roster, who leveled heavy accusations towards head trainer Bill DeMott after being released. Chase continued to wrestle on the indies before leaving the business in 2017. CJ Parker. When you're named after the babiest Baywatch babe of them all, and you're not a member of the female persuasion, you most probably have an inkling that WWE don't exactly have world title aspirations for you. CJ Parker was fine for what he was in NXT, but the man himself was frustrated with his lot and lack of a call-up to main, requesting and receiving his release in March of 2015. As Juice Robinson, he reinvented himself on the indie and international circuits, wrestling for Impact, Ring of Honor, and primarily New Japan. Outside of the ring, he is engaged to former WWE and current AEW star Toni Storm. Colin Cassidy. There's a lot of things WWE developmental can teach a prospective star, but being 7 foot tall, well, you can't teach that now, can ya? Colin Cassidy, aka Big Cass, was always going to get a shot in WWE given his size and look, and to be fair to the big man, his team with Enzo Amore had a great run and was very entertaining at the time. His main roster singles push petered out, however, and he was released amid rumors that his backstage attitude was poor, coupled with substance abuse issues. Directly defying Vince McMahon's instruction for a segment on SmackDown was the last straw, but it wasn't the end of Big Cass's problems, which followed him onto the independent scene and almost cost him his life. Thankfully, he is doing a lot better these days and has looked impressive while working for Impact as W. Morrissey. Connor O'Brien. Believe it or not, Connor O'Brien, aka Connor, debuted all the way back in 2001. He first signed with WWE in 2005, but requested his own release due to personal reasons a couple of years later. After a few years on the indies, he got a second bite of the cherry in 2010 and finally found the thing that worked for him in the Ascension tag team with Rick Victor, aka, Victor. A force on the third brand, the Ascension were basically buried once they were called up, but managed to last for a few years before being released on the same day. Connor has been active on the indies since and is a trainer at the Wrestling Lab School alongside Jay Lethal in St. Petersburg, Florida. Corey Graves. Corey Graves put in the time, wrestling for over a decade on the indies as Sterling James Keenan before being signed by WWE in 2011. His NXT run was promising and he became one half of the brand's tag team champions alongside Adrian Neville before turning heel and going solo. Sadly, persistent concussion issues soon put an end to his in-ring career just as it looked set to properly get going. Fortunately for Corey, he transitioned successfully into being an on-air personality and broadcaster, eventually settling into a role as one of WWE's main commentators. He's also married to WWE star Carmella. Lucky bastard. Danny Burch. A mainstay on the British independent scene for years, where he wrestled as Martin Stone, Danny Burch was signed by WWE in late 2011, but was barely used before being let go in April of 2014. He came back a year and a bit later in a weird situation where he would show up on NXT from time to time, despite there being confusion as to whether or not he was actually officially signed to a contract. The battling Brit officially put pen to paper in April of 2018 and subsequently formed an NXT tag team title winning team with Oney Lorcan. Released in January of 2022, Burch is looking to revitalize his career on the indie scene, once again going by the name Martin Stone. Dante Dash. Dante Dash, aka Flex Freeman, he must have a thing for alliteration, had the sort of look and physical tools that WWE craves. Though he possessed many athletic gifts, the real deal never quite made it in WWE's feeder system. However, much of that was by his own choice. Realizing his dream was to be a police officer and not a WWE superstar, Dash asked for and received his release in order to try out for the Force. He is currently working as a police officer in New Jersey. Dean Ambrose. news. Indie sensation Jon Moxley signed a WWE developmental deal in 2011, having previously wrestled a handful of tryout matches for the company. The Lunatic Fringe's time in the farm system was eventful, as he feuded or had matches with the likes of Mick Foley, William Regal, and CM Punk. Not too long after FCW became NXT, Moxley, as Dean Ambrose, was on his way to the main roster alongside frequent opponents Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins as The Shield. Ambrose had a pretty fantastic run in WWE, winning the United States, Intercontinental, Tag Team, and Heavyweight titles. It wasn't perfect by any means, and the man himself was so dissatisfied and burnt out by the end that he neglected to sign a new contract. These days, Mox calls AEW home. He's married to former WWE personality Renee Young, and the couple have one child together, Eric Rowan. Big Eric Rowan was on the verge of packing it all in before he was told that he would be called up to the main roster alongside Bray Wyatt and Luke Harper. He and Harper had originally been informed that only Bray would be graduating, and feeling the economic crunch of supporting a family on a developmental deal, Rowan considered leaving the business altogether. Luckily for him, and us as fans, the Giant got his promotion and, all things considered, had 7 strong years on the main roster. The two-time tag team champ had solid runs with Harper and Daniel Bryan before being released in 2020. He's since returned to the Indies and shown up in AEW under the name Eric Redbeard. He's also recently branched out into acting work. Garrett Dillon. Garrett Dillon was something of a throwback, looking and wrestling like an old-school cowboy, a la Stan Hansen or someone of that ilk. And Dillon had cause to portray an outlaw since his father was a famous wild man in his own right. Not that Garrett's old man was a wrestler or anything, but rather outlaw country singer and actor Chris Christopherson. Though he had raw potential, WWE weren't entirely convinced and cut him not once, but twice in both 2013 and 2014. He's found more personality and character on the indies in the past few years as he continues to chase his dreams under the alias War Pig Jody. Jay Bronson. Jay Bronson, or James Bronson if you're not into the whole brevity thing, had wrestled for MLW and toured for All Japan, as well as fought in 4 professional MMA fights before signing with WWE in 2010. His WWE career didn't really take off as he must have hoped, and he was released in late 2013 after being out for a long time with an injury. It was later revealed that Bronson, real name Phil Friedman, was the son of former Mattel and Toys R Us president Neil Friedman, and given that Phil was in his late 30s when he inked a contract, his signing may have at least partially been a favor to one of WWE's most valuable partners. Jay Bronson has competed infrequently since his WWE release, wrestling only 4 times since 2012. Jake Carter. A college football standout who seemed primed for the NFL, Jesse White's hand-egg dreams ended like so many others due to injuries. Still, being a big athletic bastard and the son of wrestling legend Vader opened the door to FCW in 2011, and White, as Jake Carter, looked to forge his own path in the business. His journey came to an end in September of 2013 when he, along with several other talents, were released. He worked a couple of indie shows after, but then left the business. The self-described entrepreneur returned to WWE to posthumously induct his father into the Hall of Fame in 2022. Jason Jordan. Amateur standout Jason Jordan was scouted by WWE Hall of Famer Gerald Briscoe, the same man who had recruited the likes of Kurt Angle and Brock Lesnar in the past. Jordan's time in developmental was a mixed bag to say the least, until he joined up with fellow master of the mat Chad Gable and formed the tremendous American Alpha tag team. The duo were one of the highlights of prime era NXT and put on many thrilling matches against a variety of opponents. It didn't quite carry over into WWE's main roster, but they still had their moments and continue to find success with alternate partners. Jason looked set for the push of his lifetime after he was chosen as the storyline offspring of Kurt Angle, a storyline that was supposed to lead to Jordan turning heel and facing his dad at WrestleMania. A severe neck injury put an end to that, and Jason was forced to retire before it could take place. He now works as a lead backstage producer for WWE and has received strong praise for his work in the role. Judas Devlin. Judas Devlin had a cup of coffee and a handful of matches in WWE's developmental before WWE decided that they just couldn't come up with anything for the tall, shredded bloke with the cracking head of hair. Devlin, real name Austin Matelson, was released after suffering a bad hip injury, to be fair, but he continued his career on the indies and even competed on a season of reality show Big Brother, placing 5th. He was one of many who, after being released, publicly criticised former head coach Bill DeMott, which led to the disgraced trainer resigning. As Viboro in Lucha Underground and as Luchasaurus in AEW, he has shown WWE what they've been missing. Cassius Ohno. NXT needed a hero, but they got Cassius Ohno instead. The well-travelled veteran did some good stuff during his first stint in developmental, having decent feuds with Richie Steamboat and William Regal, but was released a couple of years in, supposedly due to his lack of commitment when it came to improving his physical conditioning. He went back to the indies, only to re-sign with WWE a few years later. His second stint was a major disappointment, as the knockout artist was used primarily to put over others before being released in 2020. He's not stepped back in the ring since, though he has teased it may happen in the future. Instead, he's focused on coaching and seminar work and hosts a podcast called Shoot Conversations on the High Spots Network. Kenneth Cameron. Better known as TNA's Bram, Kenneth Cameron's NXT career came to an ugly end in late 2012 when he was charged with disorderly intoxication and battery of a law enforcement officer, having previously been arrested for DUI. He's been active in wrestling since, working for Impact, Pro Wrestling Noah, and now the NWA. Previously married to Charlotte Flair, he is now engaged to fellow NWA star Camille. Leo Kruger. A performer's time in developmental should be about not only fine-tuning their skills, but also experimenting with new characters and gimmicks. If being South African mercenary and big game hunter Leo Kruger isn't working out as you planned, you can always become Russell Brand-inspired, free-loving partier Adam Rose instead. There was always a ceiling for Adam and his Rosebuds, but he did well to take it as far as he did before requesting and receiving his release amid a backdrop of domestic abuse charges, which was subsequently dropped. He then did the indie thing for a bit before retiring in 2019. Not entirely sure what he's up to nowadays, but he was recently pictured with Bam Neely and one half of Gemini, so if that's not good enough for you, then I don't know why you bother watching. Lincoln Broderick. Lincoln Broderick only worked 3 matches under the WWE umbrella before he was given his future endeavors. Real name Marcus Anthony, Broderick had a good look, with his mohawk and massively muscled frame catching the eye, but he wasn't all that once the bell rang. Good enough for OVW mind, where he was 2-time heavyweight champion. The father of 4 is an avid gamer and fitness freak. Luke Harper. Brodie Lee was another small hall talisman whose hard work finally paid off when WWE changed their hiring policy and opened the door to supposed indie darlings. An integral part of the Wyatt family's success, Luke Harper was an experienced workhorse and often the glue that held everything together. A former tag team and IC champion, Harper left WWE in late 2019 and showed up in AEW as the Exalted One. He was just getting going when he tragically passed away following a short battle with illness, aged just 41. A tremendous big man beloved by all who worked with him, his legacy will never be forgotten. Memo Montenegro. Imagine you come from wrestling royalty, the son of legendary luchador Dos Caras and the brother of legendary bastard Alberto Del Rio. Then you get to WWE developmental and they christen you Memo Montenegro. And then your main contribution on television is losing to Big E Langston in 21 seconds. Is it any wonder the poor lad requested his own release just months into his contract? He's since put the mask on and worked for various promotions as El Hijo de Dos Caras. Mike Dalton. Mike Dalton was a big deal in FCW, winning the promotion's world title as well as the tag team titles with the future Roman Reigns. In NXT, Dalton was constantly told that he was on the chopping block, and knowing that he either had to come up with something big or lose his job, created narcissistic selfie-taking supermodel Tyler Breeze. Breeze was a winner and turned into quite the stalwart for the Black and Gold group. His fortunes on the main roster were mixed, but the Fashion Police tag team with Fandango was a blast to watch. Breeze was back working in NXT when he was released from his contract in 2021. He currently runs the Flatbacks Wrestling School with Sean Ty Dillinger Spears and is an avid video game streamer. Mojo Rawley, my man, my playboy. Mojo Rawley managed to stay hyped for the duration of his WWE tenure, despite the idiots never finally pulling the trigger on him. There were highlights, such as winning the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal in 2017, but Mojo could and should have done more. It was not for want of trying, but it was not to be, and he was released in 2021, a year after he almost died during a battle with COVID-19. He currently runs a talent marketing agency and is a co-host for TMZ Sports. Nick Rogers. Nick Rogers, whose real name is Austin Spencer, another NXT-ish name if I've ever heard one, only made 2 televised appearances for NXT before he was cut loose. He, like so many other prospects, had a good look, but was ultimately rather bland and didn't have the it factor to take it to the next level. Austin currently works as a mortgage broker in his native British Columbia. Sounds about right. Oliver Gray. Joel Redman was one of the more solid workers on the British circuit, honing his skills for 6 years around the country prior to being signed by WWE in 2012. Renamed Oliver Gray, his big NXT highlight was being one half of the inaugural NXT Tag Team Champions alongside compatriot Adrian Neville. Injuries marred the rest of his time in Florida, and he was released in April 2014. He's since gone back to grafting on the indie circuit and wrestled a few tours for All Japan, where he looked set to be a regular prior to the pandemic. Richie Steamboat. I do not envy anyone who is supposed to live up to the legacy of an all-time great like Ricky Steamboat, but the Dragon's son Richie was possibly on his way to doing just that before fate intervened. One of FCW/NXT's top prospects, Steamboat Jr. was an FCW tag team and heavyweight champion and had some cracking matches with the likes of Antonio Cesaro and Cassius Ohno. He was full of potential and had a real likability to him as a throwback fiery babyface, but regrettably, he was forced to retire from in-ring competition after suffering a serious back injury and undergoing major surgery. I'm not sure where Richie currently works or what he does, but I do know that he's married with 3 kids and often attends shows with his dad. His wife is a divorce lawyer and has her own practice. Good luck, Richie. Rick Victor. Rick Victor, incredibly, began his career way back in 1999 after training at the Hart family dungeon. He certainly paid his dues in that basement and on the indie scene before being signed by WWE in 2011. The story of his time in WWE is pretty much the same as Ascension tag team partner Connor's. Since his WWE release, he's done some indies and is the host of the Wrestling with the Struggle podcast. He is also self-described as an aspiring voice talent. Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns recently told a story about how when he was just starting out in FCW, he cut a promo for Dusty Rhodes describing himself as a walking billion-dollar check. His contemporaries didn't get it, but Reigns knew that he was going to be a major player in the business, and boy, was he right. From the Shield to the Big Dog to the Tribal Chief, Roman has built quite the empire and solidified his status as one of the best ever. He's weathered some serious storms, not least of which was his battle with leukemia, but come out of them on the other side as the industry's standard bearer. He looks set to carry WWE for the next however many years, and it feels like sports entertainment is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Reigns. Seth Rollins. Like Roman Reigns, Seth freaking Rollins was one of the few chosen by WWE to lead the company into the future. Not that he didn't have to work for it, of course, because he did both before and after making it to WWE. The inaugural NXT champion has been consistently one of the best performers on WWE television for a long time now, and has shown his ability to reinvent himself over and over again. Still only in his mid-30s, there are hopefully many great years ahead for the Architect. Outside of WWE, Seth helps run the Black and Brave Wrestling Academy. He is married to fellow WWE star Becky Lynch, with whom he has a daughter. Tack. Back in my day, tack was something you smoked behind the bike sheds at school. As it relates to NXT, tack was Brandon Carter, a longtime wrestling fan and former defensive tackle at Texas Tech University who turned heads with his own. His own head, I mean, because it had a massive tattoo on it. His time in WWE developmental was fraught, however, as he repeatedly went on Twitter to write some things about his colleagues that he probably shouldn't have. No surprise when he was unceremoniously dropped in early 2013 then. Carter now works as a licensed realtor in the Lone Star State. Xavier Woods. Xavier Woods got his WWE contract by simply showing up unannounced at FCW HQ, aka a rundown warehouse, and applying for a job. His stay in developmental wasn't much to write home about, though he did win the FCW tag titles once, and his first role on the main roster wasn't exactly a triumph either. He, like Big E, and to a lesser extent Kofi Kingston, must have been fearing for his future before he harnessed the power of positivity and joined the New Day. Woods has been an important player in WWE ever since. A huge video game fan IRL, Xavier is behind the highly successful Up Up Down Down YouTube channel. Anya. And now we move on to the divas. Yes, divas. All 6 of them, starting with Anya. The Russian-born Anna Bogomazova, who has a black belt in Taekwondo, only wrestled 5 matches for NXT before breaking her arm during a training session. She claimed the injury led to her release in May of 2013, just 10 months after signing with the company. Anna planned on suing WWE over the whole situation and actually filed suit against Steve Kern and WWE in March of 2017, but voluntarily dismissed it in June. Since her release, Anna has done some acting in shows like Brooklyn Nine-Nine and is currently touring as a stand-up comedian on the Make Laughs Not War tour, with a portion of the proceeds going to help victims of the war in Ukraine. Audrey Marie. A former FCW Divas champion, Audrey Marie didn't find as much success when developmental turned black and gold. Outside of a brief feud with Sasha Banks, Marie mostly just found herself on the losing side of tag matches and was released in May of 2013. Real name Ashley Miller, Audrey Marie was not a trained wrestler before accepting a developmental deal while working as an accountant, though she was a fan and only briefly continued her career on the indies post-release. She got married to Tyler Breeze in 2016, though they are now reportedly divorced. Miller currently works as a cosmetologist at a Florida salon. Charlotte. A decade later, and Charlotte Flair has become one of WWE's biggest stars, male or female. A history maker who has headlined pay-per-views, including WrestleMania, and won more titles than I can be bothered to count, her legacy as one of WWE's greatest women's wrestlers ever is assured. Outside of the ring, the Queen is engaged to be married to former WWE and current AEW star Andrade El Idolo. Emma. Aussie star Emma enjoyed life in NXT and seemed at one point to be among the brand's most improved performers. An all-rounder who could play babyface or heel, do serious or comedy, she encountered mixed fortunes during a main roster run that is probably best remembered for her goofy team with Santino Marella. Things seemed to be going well for her, but in October of 2017, she was shockingly released from her contract. Emma, under her real name Tennille Dashwood, has worked consistently since then and is currently signed to Impact Wrestling. She is also an online influencer and has done modeling work. Paige. Paige was another, like Charlotte, who really stood out from the pack in the Farm League. Having done pretty much all there was to do in NXT, the then NXT Women's Champion had a historic debut on the post-WrestleMania 30 Raw, beating AJ Lee to win the Divas title in record-setting fashion. A popular and hard-working young veteran, the anti-Divas in-ring career sadly was continually interrupted and then eventually ended by injuries. She's still contracted to WWE, but hasn't been seen in an age and spends most of her time on Twitch. She still hopes that she will one day be able to make a comeback to active competition. Summer Rae. Summer Rae was promoted to the main roster in 2013 to be Fandango's full-time dance partner after an inconsistent spell in developmental. While on main, she did a little of this and that and was involved in some memorable storylines such as the one involving Dolph Ziggler, Rusev and Lana, but was forced to sit out due to injuries and was released on the same day as Emma after a year of inactivity. She's since done the occasional indie thing, but her primary focus has been on modeling and doing stuff in the crypto/blockchain sphere. I don't understand that. Summer also recently made a one-off return to WWE as an entrant in the 2022 Women's Royal Rumble match.